So this is kind of the difference of it. So there's a lot of different styles of what they're calling aerial yoga. And this is a part of my education that I need to do, and a part of now your education that you're going to have to do. Anti-gravity is one of the most familiar, and Unata, we all three of us started our brands at the same time, unknowingly, but we did. I also believe in kind of like that universal consciousness where I know when I used to learn circus, it was like, oh, well, this is my trick. And it's like, I bet you someone else somewhere in the world has done that, you know? And usually it is, because I do know when I was first doing aerial yoga, that there was probably someone in Poland or in Russia also not calling it aerial yoga yet, 20 years ago, just going like, oh, wow, that's kind of like a strap for yoga, ooh, and really just doing it, and so, but if you think of the timeline, which we'll kind of get into, I can start it now, of it's important to also know the history of aerial, because you guys know, you guys are yoga teachers, so you already know the history of yoga. Like when you take a 200-hour yoga teacher training, you learn about the history, right? The lineage, and now you're all a part of the yoga teacher lineage. And so we're calling this aerial yoga, so we're actually using the word yoga. So I really find it important to stay true to that lineage, those time-tested postures, and have respect for them. But we're also adding this word aerial in, and so also for you to know the history of aerial is important to understand where it has come from and why there's other brands. In floor-based yoga, right, we have so many different styles, your hatha, your vinyasa, your power core, your kundalini, right, your bikram, ashtanga. There's like so many different styles, and who's to say what is right or wrong or what's the way, but they all have been developed over time. And I think that, at least for me on my own journey, when I started yoga at 18, I needed power yoga, and I'm glad that Brian Kest was my original teacher. I was a professional athlete. I don't know if I could have just gone into a more basic or like a Nia class or a yin class at that time. I had a hard time doing like a 5-minute shavasana, I was just like, and I was still very like, look at me, yeah, and thank God that he continued with me for years and years to break that down, and even with the power yoga, the more physical side of yoga, I got the more spiritual side and the mental side over the years, it was plugging into me, and so, having those different forms are great for different people at maybe different times in their life. I then went into Kundalini yoga, which is like another, thank goodness I had to go inside. I needed to actually go into where I was at and kind of shake the shit out of me and go to, a calmer place of service. And it helped really me more mentally, than physically, although the nervous system was hugely affected by Kundalini for me, which was very helpful. And then I went into more vinyasa, so Shiva Ray's classes, which were more movement style, which was like, broke me out of this like, wait, you just do it like this. This is how you do it. And then she was like, no, you could go like this. I was like, are you sure? Because I was taught you do it just like this. And then it was like a wonderful opening, especially for me as a female, to embrace and accept and be open, but also understand how there can be some exploration and flow even within this beautiful structure and have safety. So, all of these different styles are staying true to yoga, but are needed and necessary and a part of our culture now, right? Aerial is the same. Aerial is much newer, though, than yoga. But aerial or circus, let's say, started more of, it was the rope originally and the trapeze. Those are some of the older apparatus that we would call aerial. Nowadays we have a star, we have a lyra, you could make anything. You got harness flying. Like aerial is a ton of stuff. It's not just rope and trapeze anymore. Now the trapeze can be hung by silk, so the trapeze can be on 2 points or 1 point, or you can have a trapeze for 4 people, right? Or you can have a trapeze that's layered and like, holy schmoly, right? Aerial has gone into a whole new world. And Cirque du Soleil, I think brought it into the mainstream, right? And aerial is things in the air, and aerial is a performance art. Aerial is a way of expressing. It can also be fitness-based. It's very physical. It's trick-based, more of, which you could think of kind of like a posture, but it's trick-based. Like, you're going to learn how to do this trick, and you're going to do it over and over until you perfect it, and then you could actually link that trick to another trick. And then, because it is a way of expressing yourself, a performance art, a form of dance, usually you put a whole bunch of tricks together, and then you make a routine, a choreography, and then you want to perform it and share it and show it. And it's about the look of it. Aerial is about what it looks like, right? So when I choreograph, for a soloist, they can kind of choose, well, so what's your good leg? What's your strong arm, right? And then we can choose, oh, you're always going to do this on the right side, and da-da-da-da. When you choreograph in a group, if I were to choreograph an aerial piece for all of you, I would just choose my good side because I'm going to choreograph it, and then you would all have to do that side to all be together, right? And I am thinking more about what it looks like. And do I care if it's good for your body? No. No, I don't really care. Like, open more because that looks cool. Or do we want it to look funky, right? Or is it beautiful and lengthy? Like, it's a way of expressing to show story. And the tricks and the drops, like, they're not all really great for your body, but they are super cool to look at and fun to do. And that's the purpose, right? We now train differently over the years. After 20 years of aerial, you realize, okay, we need to train a little differently. We make sure to learn things on both sides. And we try to, climb now with our shoulders down, and we try and protect our body a little bit more. But still, when I do shows, I don't, okay, this show everyone do on your right side, next show do on your left side to make sure we're all balanced out so we don't, hurt our body long term. No way. It is like, you're going to do it on, like I, for years, did the same choreography on the same side every single day, right? And this causes imbalances in the body. So I'm stronger on one side, more flexible on one side. Well, with every action, there's a reaction. That means the other side is not happy, and it's gonna shift in my body and actually cause pain. And that's why I say it's not really good for you, right? It can be very dangerous, especially once we get into doing these tricks over and over, or getting into choreographies. But if we think about it in general, aerial is a performance art. And that's how it originated. That's where it's gone and to the mainstream, right? As we see shows, we see Cirque du Soleil shows, they are performing for us. They're having a reason for movement. They're sharing an art form. And it's also very physical, so it does have some fitness elements to it, to where talking about like anti-gravity is actually certified through fitness. It is, even though some of it is called anti-gravity yoga, they are not yoga instructors. They don't teach about yoga. I've had many people come from that and like say like that they didn't even know what yoga was after an anti-gravity yoga training, So it was more fitness based, which is just fine. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's to understand. It's on 2 points, so it's actually different in the rigging. And there's a bit more swing and a bit more flip because it's based in fitness and they're certified through fitness. And the rigging, I think, inhibits you from doing more yoga, which is one of the reasons ours is not on 2 points. But that is the original direction when it was created, more in that way. And it's just good for you to know that when they're trained, it's how they are trained. And I think it's an awesome form of fitness. If you can use it very much like TRX. Have you guys ever done TRX? Or yeah? So it's very similar in that kind of way, where it's a form of fitness, and the teachers are certified through this fitness, I wish I knew, ACE, I think, or one of the fitness regulators, which I can't remember what it is. But anyway, so aerial, though, started with rope trapeze. And I remember 24 years ago, the first show had a red silk coming down. It was absolutely amazing. And that was a shift, a change in the circus world. From the rope came this silk hanging straight down, which is actually one long piece that goes all the way up, it attaches and comes back down, so you can hold on to two pieces, and they have them here. And so there was definitely a new shift in the aerial world. And during that time is also soon after when the first aerial hammock in the circus sense was created, out of aerialist, well, usually like gymnasts or dancers were recruited to go into Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil taught them how to do aerial, and then they went on tour doing aerial. And it was very like you wouldn't teach anyone because those were your tricks and your choreography, and that was like how you were hired, right? And so you would learn this, and then you would make some of your own stuff up. It was kind of like and it took a while for it to grow. But what happened is some of those performers that went into Cirque du Soleil left Cirque du Soleil and continued to play and continued to learn and started to teach one at a time, you know, and I was one of those being taught one at a time, and I was very lucky to be taught. I was a gymnast at UCLA, and my coach, Valerie Condos, which is an amazing mentor to me, absolutely incredible woman. She was mentored by Coach John Wooden, who's known as the best coach in the world, which you should look up and watch any videos on him or research him. He's brilliant. And she took me and my girlfriend, Stella Ume, who was an Olympian from Canada, to a show called Cirque du Soleil. And she just knew that both of us would be right for it. She also knew that I hated competing. I hated it. I just hated it. I loved training. I thought it was so fun. I loved it. And then I just hated competing. Because if my teammate fell, I would win. Like, that just felt weird to me. And like, I could win competition. I could win the warm-up, you know, but in competition it would just be like, ugh. And I felt always a lot of pressure. I put too much pressure on myself, and this was a part of why I needed Kundalini. And I grew up in a world of negative reinforcement, where my coaches violently hurt me and trained me with negativity, and so, you know, competition was just like another element of that, where it was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna get in trouble, you know, and it was hard on me. But she knew that I was different, and so took me to Cirque du Soleil, and then she actually made a deal with some of them that they could come train at the UCLA gymnastics place, and while they were there, though, they would in turn teach me and Stella what they knew. And we didn't learn very much at that point, because we were just learning to climb a rope and climb a silk, which if you've ever done that, it's very hard. And I didn't want to use my legs. I was so strong, I just wanted to use my arms, you know, and you got to use your legs. And just learned a little bit from there, which was really lovely. And started training with my friend Bianca Cepetto, who I continued to train with. And we ended up doing little performances and whatnot kind of around LA, and had all these gigs, and we were kind of forced into having to make up new stuff all the time, because it was like everyone always wanted something new each time, because we were at the same place, and we were always doing it at these clubs, like the Key Club in Los Angeles. They actually like put a rig and motor in for us, totally crazy, for us to do. And so a part of that journey was Greg with me, my husband, and he knew rigging because we had learned it in De La Gorda. But a part of this journey was starting just to feel like you could create new apparatus, because once the silk came in, there was this like, we can just do other things, you know, and like the harness then became available, like from rock climbing. You could like learn on the wall as you climb the wall, then you could jump off the wall and flip, and it started just to kind of experiment. So I do remember Greg and Drea Weber in New York doing a gig, probably 22 years ago, so maybe 2 years after the silks were first put into Cirque du Soleil, that they looped it up into, they took the other end and they looped it up. And they didn't put a swivel yet on it because they didn't know that they could. That took them a little while. And they like started to play and create things and brought it back. And then Bianca looped it with a swivel and was like, okay, I want to propose this. I want to propose this act. So created a choreography, created tricks, and choreographed a piece and taught it to Drea and Judith and I. And actually, all I knew of the hammock was like, I just learned those tricks that she taught me, you know, and we did that choreography. And then the next show in Cirque du Soleil had a hammock in it. So it's a very new art form and a very beautiful art form. And it started in the circus world. And there was still no yoga yet at that point. It was circus, it was trick-based, and that's what we were doing. And I remember 16 years ago, though, as I was, or 17 years ago now, sorry, as I was getting ready to perform one of the hammock acts, I found out I was pregnant. And so I continued to do some hammock for a little while, and then I got a little heavier, and then I got a lot heavier, and I couldn't get in. And as you stand there to reach up to pull yourself in, it was like, I can't get in, I'm too fat. So Greg lowered it for me, and I could get my butt in there, and that was kind of one of the first like epiphanies I had, like this awakening of, holy cow, you could be fat and do this. Holy cow, this feels really good to hang and get some traction. Like, oh my God. And then I was like, oh, the opening. And then it was like, I'm just going to stretch. And, you know, I was already a yoga instructor at this point, and I was going to stretch. And then it started to become, this is the coolest yoga prop ever. Because I hate the strap, because I got to keep doing it, and it slips off my leg, and you know, and this is a cooler yoga strap. You know, could be kind of like a bolster to me. It was kind of like a block to me. It was like all these things to me. And so that became my creation of what we call now AIReal Yoga. But again, like I said, this universal consciousness, you know, the silks were developed, the hammock was developed in the aerial world. There was aerialists, and a lot of us aerialists were in a ton of pain. And a lot of us went to Pilates or yoga or physical therapy to heal our body. And so there was this new mix of, you know, aerialists that were getting older that had to think about their body in order to have longevity in their career. And I was lucky as a gymnast at UCLA for Valerie to bring in yoga into my life when I was 18. And everyone else hated it except me. I became the weird hippie of UCLA gymnastics. But I loved it, and it healed my body and soul and mind. And I knew that more people needed it. And I was a teacher by nature. I was already a personal trainer. I was studying to be a professor, and I knew people needed it. And so I integrated it in anything and everything that I did, and then had to teach it. And then even in my circus world, I became the dance captain. Obviously, as a teacher, you just become like that. I was the dance captain in all the shows that I was in, assisted the choreographer, and therefore I had to warm everyone up, which means that I forced everyone to do yoga every warm-up. And so it began to integrate as once I started to see the hammock as a prop, that forcing more people to do it, and then I used everyone as guinea pigs to figure out how it could be for everybody. My mother also inspired me as a very overweight woman, not taking care of herself, that had MS, that said she couldn't do yoga, and I was like, bullshit, you're gonna do yoga. And she really couldn't do floor-based yoga in the end. It was like, it was too hard. So the hammock also became this tool where I focused more at how to assist and let it hold you and make it more accessible. That was the first things that came to my mind. And so I used it in ways so she can do yoga, and she does now do aerial yoga, and that was really huge for me. And then growing with it over the last 16 years, finding more of how it can refine and how it can progress and how it can deepen into those levels. And so for me, I wanted, and I guess I needed it to be legitimate, because as I started to teach it, I saw aerial growing, and I saw it growing in some places really well and in other places very dangerous. And it was very scary to me because I had been doing it for so long, and I had just known that it wasn't going to be safe and it wasn't going to grow if we allow this to be taught in a way that's not safe, you know? And I really believed in the growth of it. And so that's where it was like, oh gosh, we gotta do it. Like Greg even was like, no, I do not wanna have retail. I do not wanna have retail. Like, we're gonna have to remember what's here, da da da. It was like, but here's a lady that just came in that bought this off Amazon, and the carabiner has a weight load of 90 pounds, and the fabric has a tear stretch of 150. Like, that's gonna kill her, you know? And he's like, oh no, I don't want to hear it. And then it was just like, we can't. Like, I can't have people being dangerous. So it became a part of his journey too, to make sure that all the equipment and rigging was safe so it could grow in a safe way. And it began my journey to make sure that there was a curriculum for teachers and studios so it could grow and expand in a safe way. And so then someone from the Yoga Alliance actually took my class, and was the one that told me, like, you need to get this, you know, certified through them. And I was just like, okay. And she's like, it's gonna be challenging, but I think you can do it. You have Greg that has a safe rigging, and you have you that has a yoga background and aerial background. So you're a teacher in both, and then he's a rigger. So it's like, the Yoga Alliance is not gonna want to certify anyone else unless there's all of these, you know, things in place. And so it kind of inspired me. So that's where the writing of the manual, and then the looking of the curriculum, and then the Yoga Alliance picking the curriculum to pieces, which was the most frustrating and yet the most beautiful and thing that has ever happened to me, and such a great honor, because it forced me to look at each thing. You know, I have an aerial circus curriculum. If you want to learn to do aerial circus and teach that, that's one thing. And then aerial yoga, it's going to be yoga. Time-tested postures, respected the lineage, using the hammock to support these postures. And as long as I stayed with that method, everything was going into place with the Yoga Alliance, with their historians, with their anatomy experts and their yoga experts, and their methodology ways and practices as a lifelong practice. And then there were certain postures that we'll talk about that are like not in there. It was just like, well, I mean, it looks like yoga posture, like tree, standing in the hammock in tree. Here, it's like, it's a yoga posture. It looks like yoga. And then they're like, well, why are you using the hammock? It looks cool. It looks cool. And it was just like, why the heck am I doing that in there? Okay. That goes into the circus book, okay? It's a cool picture, because it's not helping or supporting the tree. It's not helping it or supporting it at all. And it's not refining it, and it's not challenging it. It looks cool, and it looks like a yoga posture. And so it made me change my perspective of, we don't want to just look, oh yeah, that looks like a yoga. You know, we don't do yoga to look like, oh, yeah, yoga, right? It's about self-healing, yeah? And everyone's going to look different, and some postures look different when you modify them or when you use a prop. And sometimes it's just a little piece of it in order to get to the next. So that's not in the manual, okay? And then there's other things there's another place that we do tree with our foot in it that it wasn't really my favorite to teach, and it's very specific because you have to be at the right hammock height, like exactly the right hammock height. So it's like, ugh, gosh. And then I feel like there's other ways to do it, but they loved it because it actually showed certain elements and supported and helped in certain elements that you couldn't get elsewhere. So it was like, okay, fine, we'll keep that one in, right? You know, and so it helped me make sure that what I'm teaching you is safe, and that these are safe as lifelong practices, if taught right and done right and modified when needed, modified. It also really pushed my belief that we don't want to compromise our body to look cool when we're doing yoga. We compromise our body in aerial dance and aerial circus to look cool. Totally fine with that. It's a way of expressing yourself. You're sharing story, yeah? In aerial yoga, we need to not compromise our body. So in yoga, in floor-based yoga, we should not be compromising our body to go farther or do more. If it's like, oh, but I really want to get to that place where I can touch my hands, so just turn your hip out and you get there. No, you're supposed to have square hips. So it's like, because we don't want to compromise our body, we need support sometimes. We might need someone to assist us. We might need a strap, we might need a bolster, we might need a block, we might need a hammock, right? And that's where we want to think about each of these postures. This is the method that we're going to go into. For each of these postures, what is the purpose of the hammock? Why are you using it? Not everyone's going to need it maybe in that posture, but if they do need it, then where are we going to place it? Why are we going to do that, right? So we want to think about that with each of the postures. Some postures are better served on the ground and not actually in the hammock, and that's going to be fine. That's why I needed you guys to be yoga teachers, because aerial yoga doesn't have to be all just flying around, right? Aerial yoga is definitely a mix of floor-based yoga and aerial yoga using the hammock. And also it's a wonderful thing to kind of like use. I think a lot of new studios had people that were kind of like scared of the hammock and scared that it would be circusy, and so they would do these mixes. Like one of the teachers that has a Pilates studio, she did a mix of floor-based Pilates, and then just started by ending with Shavasana in the hammock. And then people are like, oh, okay, that's okay. And the next time then she added one little element, yeah? And then they're like, oh, okay, it's not so bad. So having these nice mixes can be great. I know that there's another teacher that does spin, half an hour spin, and then a half an hour of aerial yoga, which is like after you do spin, you definitely need some yoga. Yeah, your hamstrings are like tight and short, and it was a great way to incorporate it. And some vinyasa teachers have a little bit of trouble too at first, because they're so used to, like, you know, doing kind of like more of this choreograph, like inhale here, exhale here, inhale here, go here, and that they're like kind of like nervous. And so it's like, great, do a vinyasa, do a sun salutation, and then let's do one aerial yoga posture. You can do that, great. Go back, do another sun salutation, another vinyasa, do another posture. So it can be integrated. I actually love integrating it where I'll do the posture on the floor, do it with the hammock, then maybe come back to it on the floor, or vice versa. It's a way to show how it can be an awesome prop. But so for me, it's become this, you know, education to help educate people on aerial yoga and aerial dance or aerial fitness or aerial circus, whatever you're going to call it, yeah? And then why we needed to have a brand is because I noticed that not everyone was in the same understanding that I was. And I felt lucky because I teach aerial circus, and I teach yoga, and I teach aerial yoga. And some people that were circus performers saw that aerial yoga was kind of booming, and so they didn't know yoga, but if they just called it aerial yoga, they would do circus tricks and just put it lower, that they could get away with it. But then they were kind of like confusing the market, because then that became, or they would do fitness with it, like swing and tricks and flips, and call it aerial yoga. That was confusing the market, because then it became this whole thing of like, oh, you have to be strong if you want to do aerial yoga. Like my mom cannot do anti-gravity yoga. There's no way in hell she could do that. She doesn't have the strength to do that. Half of the clients at my yoga studio, can't do aerial circus or like more the fitness base because they're just not strong enough. They're just not, you know, and so it kind of like hurt the market a little bit. And then there was yogis that weren't aerialists and hadn't been trained in aerial that would use the hammock, and then they started more just to make it look like the yoga postures, but not really knowing how to safely use the hammock. And that kind of confused the market too, because it began to become unsafe. Then YouTube, which is amazing, I use it for everything, kind of also kind of scared us in the market a bit, because just like you were saying, you can learn off of it. How do you know if you're doing it right? How many times do you teach floor-based yoga in your Warrior 3 and you're like, okay, square the hips, and they're like, their hips are completely out, and then you square them up and they're like, they feel like they're doing this, you know? They don't even know what square is because it just doesn't feel right. And people, we don't know what our body is doing or what it looks like all the time. We need someone. We need a teacher. This is why people come to class, you know? So it was allowing it to grow, but also kind of endangering it too a little bit. And so that's where it was this, okay, I'm teaching aerial yoga. You know, it's been 16 years now. But then there was a time 9 years ago where it was like, if we want this to grow safely, we also have to brand it now. Because now we have to help educate the market. Well, what's hatha yoga? What's vinyasa yoga? You know, when someone says, oh my God, I just went to the best yoga class ever. Me, I'm like, oh, what kind? What was it? You know, and then they're like, oh, I was at a, you know, Ashtanga class. I was like, oh, you know, it's very different than a yin class, you know? And it began to me to feel like that was necessary. And that's where the brand came in. So we decided to spell it a little different because it's like yoga in the air, but really yoga. The other reason that I did this is that I co-owned a company called AIRealistic, that was AIR. It was an aerial theater company, an international aerial theater and rigging company. And we created shows all over the world. Greg was the director, and Merlin Larson is technical director. And Abby and Gwen were also partners, and we were all in De La Guardia together. They mainly originated as rock climbers and dancers, and we created this incredible company. We would do most of when Cirque du Soleil opened a show, we would always be creating that show, which was, because we had a great relationship with Cirque du Soleil, which was always kind of funny, like, why don't you just hire your own people? But they wanted something cool and different and new. We specialized in harness flying. And so I already had a business that was branded and licensed as AIRealistic. So, you know, everyone was already calling it AIRealistic Yoga, but it was a very weird name. And so for me to go AIReal Yoga, it was very easy to trademark. As things are hard to trademark if you've ever trademarked something. Like, you have to prove that, like, no one else calls it that it's yours, and, you know, and everyone already was, so that's why we did. If I had a crystal ball, I would not have done that. You know, in that time, I should have just called Air Yoga or something easier, because, in my opinion, just because when you see it on paper, you see the difference, but when I verbalize it, it's very challenging to know the difference. But I didn't know that there'd actually be a whole bunch of other brands, because I didn't know. Then it just like has slowly come out, you know, of the woodworks. So that's kind of where the name comes from, though, is yoga in the air, but really yoga. That was the idea behind that. I no longer have AIRealistic. We actually stopped as a company. One of our company members recently died of cancer, and she was a mom of 2 little ones, and her husband was our technical director, and so he still will consult if we need it, which is absolutely amazing because he's brilliant, but it just became too difficult and challenging for us all to do that. And so we split off, and there's a company in New York, and he stays in New York, and we stay in Ventura. So it's kind of where also the Yoga Alliance had a lot of confidence in this company and this support system that I have and I came from. And then that's where the name comes from. And yeah, having a brand then helps people go, oh, there's a studio that offers AIReal Yoga. Great. I know that it's rigged safely. I know that the teachers are yoga teachers and they've been certified AIReal Yoga teachers. I know that the curriculum is safe and it's based in yoga. This, to me, is super important. As it does grow, if there's a studio that has anti-gravity, people need to know, oh, it's on 2 points. You might want to have some strength, and you should know that it's going to be more based in fitness, and their teachers aren't yoga certified, and that's important to know. And certain people, like I can do anti-gravity, and I like it. I mean, I've only done one class, but I know that I could take that class. My mother would not go to take that class, right? My mom would go to a private lesson ultimately, or she would go to the restorative AIReal Yoga class. You know what I mean? And this is going to help for studios too. As you brand, you can feel confident that you have that support and you have that backing, but also then you can start to have your fundamental classes, your introduction classes, your restorative classes, your power AIReal Yoga classes. Like you can have Vinyasa AIReal Yoga. You can have those mixes within all of that. But for the population, it starts to become a way for them to understand what they're getting into. Just like if it said in a Ashtanga class or a Hatha class or a Yin class or a Bikram, yeah? So we've had to do that with AIReal so people know what they are getting. And I think that has been helping as it does grow, so people can start to have that trust within the brand and with the teachers, and have that support. Why on a single point and not on a double point? So this is just years of practicing, and you'll see this with all of our gear, and Greg will probably talk to you about that too, but because I'm always asking like, ooh, did you see this new piece of gear? And it's always yeah, that came out 10 years ago, but that's when I finally see it. Because there's these gold ones now that I thought would be really cool to have gold. Yeah, I like gold anyway. But what he does is it's his job, but also his passion and what he loves to do, and he has some friends that do it with him, is they are testing gear. They're like gear snobs and like gear geeks, and they just love it. I've kind of become a gear geek too. I'm like, ooh, look at that new carabiner, But what he does is he gets all the new, and he tests, he makes sure that they come from a good manufacturer. We actually don't buy anything from China, even though Greg works a lot in Macau and in China and doing shows. He does know that there are some manufacturers there that are upholding the standards of the United States, and they're great, but and those would be the only ones he would go to, but he wouldn't just buy from any other company because their standards are different, and unfortunately understanding their standards for each manufacturer is challenging, and it takes a long time to get to know them and understand them, that because they're different and in some places not as strong of standards as in the United States, we just can't take that risk. It's very similar to how we were trained in Cirque du Soleil standards. So we just go to the highest standard. And for me, it's your lifeline. So I don't know any other standard except the highest standard. And I don't want to test the medium standard. It's not worth it to me. And honestly, you don't save any money. People always think you're not going to save money in the end. Longevity of the equipment, the use, so that's why we don't, and that's just something to think about. And all the manufacturers that we use, Greg has a relationship with, because he also makes really crazy stuff. Like the AIReal Yoga is like the simple, easy. He makes crazy things where you hang from hundreds of feet, all like crazy things you did. This is what my husband designs. And we did the China Olympics where we had these giant sculpture beings walking and people flying all over them, and we had this head that we did in Austria that was 80 feet, and we had this thing coming up and going at wild. So he has to make sure that the gear and the manufacturers are good. But what he does for AIReal Yoga is he knows the manufacturers, he has a relationship and works with them, and then he tests everything for our use. specifically for aerial yoga? Is it going to have longevity? 2 days, 2 years, 20 years. Weather, heat, places that are moist, or if they have a hot studio, or if you're outside or inside. And then that have good use. Like there's these swivels that I thought were super, super pretty. They're attached to the carabiner, so it saves us height. I was like, this is the most brilliant idea ever. It's a carabiner swivel in one. Unfortunately, it doesn't spin with people on it smooth. You have to put a ton of weight onto it, like 1,000 pounds, and then it spins. So none of us weigh 1,000 pounds, so it sucks for aerial yoga. But it'd be really cool if we had a 1,000-pound globe that needed to spin, right? So he's kind of done all this work. I stopped questioning him now. Right? Every once in a while I'll be like, did you just print? Never mind. So why we use each of the gear is it's also cost efficient. We also have a studio. I'm a studio owner. I know how hard it is. I have 2 kids. I'm a family. I'm a yoga teacher. We need things to be cost efficient. So he wants to use the least amount of gear to make it more safe and cost efficient, and that is used for the purpose that we need and is going to work and is going to last. And so he now does that, and then he does all these tests with it, like with the hammocks, these pull tests to see when they're going to break. And so he loves to do those, especially like you have to break all the stuff, and so he's like, ugh. And we have our neighbor is a manufacturer for steel, so they make something new, and then they're like, yeah, now we're going to break it, and you have to pull it and shove it and see how long, and then we know, okay, so you can weigh, and then after that, then there is a 3 times safety factor put on everything. When you are using human dynamic load, we're not just sitting there, not moving. We're moving, right? We're not doing like crazy moving, but we're moving, so it's dynamic load, yeah? Even if you just sit into it a little bit fast, it's dynamic load, and it's human load, so it's different. So there's a 3 times safety factor. Versus hanging a fan or a lamp. There's different safety factors, but when it's human, it's different. So there's always that put on it. We even did a test once, which I thought that I got to be a part of, because one of the hammocks was at our studio and there was a little hole, and one of my friend's sons just like, oh, there's a hole, and he's like, and he just like ripped the hole open, and it was kind of like, I'd never seen that before. First off, most people are like, oh, there's a hole, and but like he just like ripped it. He was just a little wild, crazy one, and it was like, oh, that's nice. Okay, so that was done. But then it was this like, we always know that if there's a little hole or run that we need to be, mindful that, it's getting dangerous. Where is the hole? And we'll talk more about this a little bit later. But I got to do a test where it was like, okay, well, if there's a hole, like, can I fall out? Like, and we put the hole right where my butt was, and I got to like, try and like get in there, and it was like really hard, really, really hard. And I mean, it ended up taking like 20 minutes to like try and fall out of this thing, which I thought was a really good thing to learn, because these things don't just like combust. It's not like they just like, oh wow, now the hammock's ripped and destroyed and everyone's on the grounds. It's like, even me trying to stick my butt, I had to open it up bigger and bigger, so I could with my hands until I could finally get out. And once I got out, you gotta slinky your way out. So it's like really damn safe when you think about it. But yes, when there's a hole, we have to be aware, but not to a point where we need to be like, scared, which, I mean, I had a lot of fear at first too when I started teaching people. And then I was like, oh my God, what if they don't teach it right? What if they fall out? What if they did it? And so we're trying to always put the 3 times safety factor everywhere now, to where it's gonna be fine. And even if there's a hole, no one's gonna fall out of it, you're gonna be fine. And it would take you 20 minutes to get your butt through there, working hard at it, yeah? So, yeah, so there's that safety element to it that we want to bring with the rigging, and Greg now really manages that aspect of it while I try and manage the curriculums and making sure that what I'm teaching you is safe, and then continuing to learn and get educated, and offering some new things now where I actually have a level 2 manual that will be coming out that once you've done this training, you'll have quite a bit of information to be able to teach the beginner to the advanced. But there are elements of the modifications and progressions that can go farther, but you have to understand the hammock to a deeper level. And so that's where the level 2 is going to come in, is really, after a couple years of teaching it, you might find that you understand the hammock in a way that we can go to this next place, because you'll have to then raise and lower and wrap in different ways. So it's more of understanding how to do some progressions and restorative with a deeper understanding of the hammock use. And then we have what we call the affiliate program, and that's something that we're just starting now, which is I don't get to come here every week and teach you a yoga class, so it's hard for you to have ongoing, learning and education. And so a part of that is I'll be filming classes that I teach and describing them to you, and then giving lesson plans. So you'll have the written, it's a lesson plan that you can print out, PDF, you can put it in your manual, and then you'll have the video of it also, so you can listen to it and hear it and go through it, an explanation of maybe the reason why I'm doing some of it. Yeah. We usually try and do it with some people also taking, so you can see what it looks like on other people, because you're going to eventually be teaching it. So it's always nice sometimes to see how that looks or works with other people too, or how maybe I deal with the other people. So that's kind of where we're going with that also. And then just going backtrack a little bit, that yes, I was a gymnast too. I grew up in Oregon on an orchard, pear and apple orchard, and my family were farmers. They were podunk hicks for sure, farmers. My mom, though, I don't think ever really wanted to be a farmer. She definitely wanted to be in the city. It was a hard life. It was a hard life. If anyone knows any kind of farming, it's a lot of work and hard life, but very beautiful. It was in Hood River, Oregon. And my aunts and uncles are still there, and my sister, and some family land is still there. And my mom wanted me to be a ballerina, but I was a very short, chunky girl, and just kind of energetic, and I hated ballet. And I don't remember much, except I hear stories of it and I see pictures that prove that I hated it. Just a little fat girl with the little tights on and the leotard, and and I was built just very much like I am now. I had muscle, I was just muscle. My father was a gymnast, and he is almost 70, and he still has a six-pack, and he's ripped, and you're just dang. My mom is not. She's kind of small bones, but doesn't take care of herself. But anyway, so I was just they would say, put your arms up for ballet. I'd be like this, or drop your shoulders. I'm they're dropped, okay? It was I didn't have the grace, and I guess I was the one, I don't know if you've ever seen the ad or that thing, I was the one hanging on my knees on the ballet bar, and I got kicked out of ballet. Who knew a 5-year-old could get kicked out of ballet? I guess I just kept doing cartwheels, and the teacher was like, listen, she does not want to be here. Take her away. And so I went into gymnastics, but my mom was not going to give up, so she made me do tap also. And the only way I knew how I got out of tap is I did a recital. And as the recital began, I walked out for the recital and stood right there. And as it started, I stood there like this. I feel like I'm such a sweet person. I have no idea. And they did say I was a really good kid, but I did not want to tap, okay? And my mom was so embarrassed. She said, she took me out, and there's a picture of me just standing there, so that's the only, I just know it from her stories, and she'll tell you that story if you meet her. So I didn't have to do tap or ballet. I did gymnastics, and I was actually a very good gymnast. I was built for it, and I loved it, and it was fun, and it was flip, and then I wasn't at home, which was hard and a hard life, and my parents weren't happy together, and so I was just away at the gym. And then which was a good experience at that beginning stages of my life in gymnastics. And I actually remember it fondly. And I don't know, I just now thought of this right now, but my coach before that was Joe Rapp, and he, Kokokaihi Gymnastics here in Oahu, he coaches there still. He was a great coach, very sweet. And then at 11, I got into a gymnastics camp that was called the National Academy that trained Olympians, and they had Tracy Talavera, Juliana McNamara, and I was accepted into that program to live there, and so I went to go live in Eugene with another family, a host family that had 3 other girls there, and started to train for the Olympics with Dick Movahill. And then Joe Rapp actually moved here to Oahu and has been coaching here ever since. And that training at 11 changed a little bit. That's where the abuse and negative reinforcement came in. And it was a Russian mentality, and they were making Olympians, and like that's really how they were making them. With negative reinforcement, you actually get people to be good fast. It's actually really, it's a strong teaching method. Like you can, because you're like, I don't want to get hit. You're like, you do what you're told. But it doesn't have longevity. There's some issues long term. But they only needed me to get to 15, 16, go to the Olympics, then what the hell do they care? Nothing else, you know? And it was what they knew. It was all that they knew. And it was accepted. The gym had no windows. Parents were not allowed in there. There were no parents. And we trained from 5 a.m. until 12:30, and then went to school. 5 a.m. until noon, and then went to school 12:30 to 3:30, then came back 4:30 to like 7 or something like that to do conditioning at the end, 6 days a week. And then traveled the world competing on the junior national team. And I became good very fast. And, it's a part of my method now why I don't teach with negativity, is I don't believe in it. But as a child, I just didn't know better. And I've, many years of thinking and counseling of like, why would I allow this? I just didn't know better. I was on a team with Olympians that were all abused, and the best ones got abused more. And I was getting good, and I was not at home, which wasn't the greatest place, but it was probably better than where I was. But I just didn't know. We just didn't know. And I was always told that whatever the adult says, you do, right? And it's like they said it was good for me, and this is how it is, and I just didn't know any better. No one had ever said you shouldn't be abused, and anyways, one day I was not flipping my wrist fast enough on a giant, and so I was not doing one of the skills perfect, and so and I was on a bar swinging down, and my coach stood in front of me, and so I swung into him and ripped my hands off, and I landed on my neck sideways, and he yelled at me to get up, and when I got up, I couldn't turn my neck. And so I had to go walk to the chiropractor in the rain, and I guess I lost consciousness, and my story to the chiropractor was different than the coach's story, and it caused a red flag, so my father came down, and then my father started questioning things, and there was a red flag put on the studio, and so I was taken out of the studio before the Olympic trials. And not that I know that I would have got in. I don't even know. I can't even remember how good I was at the time, except that was the dream and that was the goal. And probably if but I was taken away, so I was kind of pissed, which is weird to me to think about now, because that's all I thought. I was just so driven into one thing. And it kind of, I actually took a lot of it on, because it opened this door into people having to look into that gym and that coach. And 2 of the coaches did get arrested. One went to jail, one didn't. His wife is the head of the Olympic Committee and has forever protected all of the abusing coaches. So in the United States Gymnastics Federation, there's an Olympic committee that runs the rules, and then there's the head judges that judge you. Head of the Olympic, head judge is the wife and also an abuser. She also hits the girls. And so she protects all of the coaches. And that's your head judge. So when you go to compete, that's who's judging you. So when you say something, you're not going to get judged well. I know all of those people, and they're my friends. Yes. And yes, and many of them are my coaches, unfortunately, too. And then one of the coaches that was an Olympic coach, Marvin Sharp, was my coach, went to jail, but then killed himself in jail. Some of the coaches haven't gotten totally held accountable yet. There's many people talking up finally. The girls have spoken before many times. People didn't listen. The head coach, the head judge is abusing. If you speak up, you're not going to do well. Yeah. So it became normalized. Yeah. And I was not the only one, but my leaving did make them look into the club, which I felt guilty of. I was like totally pissed at my dad for saying something, because then, all the other kids didn't have a coach for a while. He got in trouble. In the end, it's been, we've all like grown up and said, thank God. Yeah. But it was a strange time for me, a very strange time for me. And men's gymnastics is very different. Especially my husband is a national champion gymnast. He was a gymnast at the Olympic Training Center. He didn't do it until he was older. And then his coaches, if someone were to smack him, he'd be like, smack him back, because he was like, it was older. And it wasn't how they were trained, and it was totally different. I mean, they were pushed into some crazy places and levels, and Chris was probably pushed more because you were very good, very young, whereas Greg was very good when he was older, and he knew not to get abused, but the men's gymnastics is different too. Women's gymnastics, you're like 11 to 13 is you're really, really good, and this coach is a guy, and it's like you're traveling around with this guy. That it's just different. But for me, coming out of that situation, it was challenging, but it was kind of this awakening too. Part of my therapy was I had to swim. And so, and a part of my other therapy was I had to go move back with my parents, but they had moved into Lake Oswego, the city, away from the farm. And I went to a normal high school. I was a cheerleader. I had a boyfriend. I grew up. I got boobs. I was like, whoa. I grew I probably 2 inches in a month. I literally woke up one day and was like, I'm like a person now. I was just so little. I had 6% body fat when I was training at some. I was just little, rah, But that was this kind of transition. I still love gymnastics and the swimming. I was a competitive swimmer then, healing my body. And my father took me to another gymnastics place that didn't physically abuse, but a part of what they were doing was they were trying to train people for college scholarships, which I was like, what the hell is that? It's all about the Olympics. I didn't even know that there was anything else except the Olympics. And that was a huge blessing to me, because honestly, a lot of my friends that are Olympians, there's that one meet that they go to at the Olympics, and then it's kind of over. Whereas a college scholarship, I got 5 years of scholarship at UCLA, which was worth $1 million, and they paid for my housing, my living, my travel, and I got to have the greatest coach in the world, Valerie Kondos, that gave me a safe haven, a safe place, and she knew that it was normalized, but this was not going to happen. There was no abuse at her place, and we were going to be a part of the change. And she wanted to grow she wanted to grow girls into strong women. She put us in counseling to help us through everything that we went through. And yeah, it was a really special time to then continue to use my talents in a wonderful way and to grow. And so that was the change, where it was like, wait, but then people got better even when they went to UCLA. So like, if you teach with love, you can still do well. And it actually became a part of kind of the culture of gymnastics where we were, of like, this is not okay. We want it to be different, and it can be different. And a part of that was one of my teammates, Chris Waller, where I met Chris. And Chris created this gymnastics camp called Gym Jam, brought all the Olympians in and brought all the UCLA gymnasts in to be coaches and teachers and mentors, and was like, no violence, no hitting, teach with love, compassion, but also teach that technique, slow, refined, one thing at a time. You can't move to the next unless you've perfected the first. Hi, love, you come sit in with us. Yeah. And like really, really, put this foundation in, that you have to have a foundation to grow. And if you skip all of it, you're not going to grow. And if you hurt people and force people, you're not going to grow. You get to be a mentor. You're here to share your talents with them. And if they choose to take it on, awesome. But when a student chooses to take it on, they're going to go farther than anyone can push them. Yeah? And it's going to be a positive thing. So it was a really, beautiful transition for me, and a part of where I continue to understand that everything I went through was important as part of my experience and my journey, but also made me into that teacher, that healer, that desire to change and make things different, and to stand up for myself, and to learn to stand up for others, and to help others stand up. And we have changed. There are amazing gymnastics places now that and coaches and teachers that teach with love and compassion, are still hard, but love and compassion, and are successful. Chris Waller, his gymnastics Gym Jam has Olympians now. Our AIReal studio has national performers and cirque performers, and so it is possible in this different way. And it's a part of the method that I want to encourage for you, is to think about the foundation, and that you are the teacher, yes, but really ultimately you're just a guide and a mentor, and you're teaching what you know. Like, this is the information that I got. I'm going to share what I have. I don't know everything, but this is what I have. I'm going to share it, and I'm going to share, as I continue to learn, I'm going to continue to share more. But it's up to the student to take it on for what they need. And they're going to hear what they need, and they're going to use what they need. And that's the beauty of it. And we're not going to force anyone to do anything. We're going to encourage. I'm going to be like, come on, you can do this. But it's not a force. They need to choose that, right? It's just like you can't really change anyone. They have to change themselves. And for us to make sure that we set a good foundation. Because with anything, and especially yoga and AIReal, if you skip the basics, you're just going to have to come back to them later. If you skip the basics, you're actually actually hurting their progression, which I think is really damaging to think about. Like, if you just skip over, then they're not going to be able to progress where they want to go. So you have to have a good foundation. We want to think of it more of like, if you can do this, then you can do this. Then you can do this. Then you can do this. And you go to here. Like, if this is your goal, we have to have these steps along the way. And we can't rush, otherwise we have to go back. And if we do rush, they might not progress, or they could get hurt. Yeah? And so we have to make each of these steps to where we're going absolutely important, and postures in and of themselves, and super exciting and fun, making the basics fun. And that's where the lifelong practice goes in. We could do it over and over and over. Like, no one gets mad at their yoga teacher for saying, okay, now we're going to go into a downward dog again, right? You don't. You're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the downward dog. I'm going to learn something new. It's going to feel different, or be different, or whatever. Intentions are different, but it's a lifelong practice. So you're continuing to learn with this repetition. So we have to stay with that method of repetition and foundation, setting a great foundation. In AIReal, it's very easy to want to go, oh, I saw this, I want to do this. And it's like, yeah, but we're not ready for it. It's also dangerous. Some of these postures, the exit is more challenging than the entrance, and the exit's more challenging than the posture. The exit is going to need strength and awareness. And if they get into it and they don't know how to get out, no, what are you going to do? You're going to fall out. And then if you just teach them, I'm just going to spot you into it and spot you out of it. I'm just going to do it for you. Well, then when they come play on their own, they're going to try it and they're not going to know what to do. So we have to protect people from themselves. And the way to do that is to set a good foundation and stick with that. Which means that you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. You're going to know all this over here. You're not going to get to teach this for a long time until you can get people through these steps, right? It's just like some postures, some people might never do the full expression of it. And that is just fine. It is about, the process. But so there's a bit of resisting that you're going to have to do in order to set a good foundation. And this is a little bit challenging with people because, it's just like we want to just do those tricks sometimes. So we're going to have to learn to make it fun, and interesting, and know where to challenge them and know where to break the rules, right? Like in a teacher training, we're going to break all of the rules. Because some of you, I want to show you everything. That way, when you leave, you don't have to be like, oh great, now it's 3 months later, I got to take another teacher training. It's like I want you to have a ton of information. So years to come, you still have things that you can pull from. And so in a teacher training, I'm going to show you things that maybe you're not ready for because there's all these steps right here, right? I got to show you all the steps all the way to the progression, even though in a real teaching scenario, you're not going to show them what this is because they're just going to want to do that. You're going to only show them where they're at and what they need to do, right? It's just how everyone is. And then in teacher training, unfortunately, I'm going to have to show you this. And so we're going to have to just do it all. So that's where I'm going to have to break the rules. But when you as a teacher are teaching, you don't want to rush them. Anyways, it's not fun. And that's where studios don't, at least that I have found, that's when studios are less successful. When they go into trick-based and they rush. Because then the people are like, oh, well, I learned that trick last time, so what are we going to do now? It's like, that's it. You don't say that about downward dog. Oh, I already did a downward dog once. I know how to do it. No, it's like, wait, no. So we have to be careful of that. Because that is going to turn into trick-based, which turns into aerial dance, pretty much, right? Which then you could do that, but you would need to separate that and call it what it is so people are aware of that and know that. But then you as a teacher are going to have to know, yeah, you're going to come in with that kind of mindset. With yoga, we have to watch out for that. And the most successful studios are those that make sure to have that foundation and then that start to range their classes with restorative or a progression or a power, so then people are coming for what they need and want, yeah? We're also going to do that by how we sequence and cue and try to have some mindfulness in how we run the classes, yeah? So the reason that I tell you this as a gymnast, as my history of that, is just kind of where it comes from too, to understand my history. So after gymnastics, I became a normal person, and then I was a swimmer and a gymnast. I became a really good swimmer where I could get a swim scholarship too. I was an athlete, so it was easy, just to go into that way. And I ended up getting a full ride to UCLA, which was the #1 gymnastics program, and so it was a huge blessing. I went to UCLA, studied sociology and higher education, and got a minor in theater. As you travel so much in gymnastics, you couldn't major in theater. Otherwise, I think I might have I was in LA, I came from Oregon, oh heck, and then I was going to California, I'm like, this is so fun. UCLA is surrounded by Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and Brentwood. Wow, and Westwood, yeah, holy cow. And then I got a 5-year scholarship because that's how it's run. You get 4 years competitive, then a year to do more. So I had a minor in theater, And I was learning aerial. I was a personal trainer. I was also studying nutrition. And I was training a lot of the new Olympic gymnasts that would come in, like Carrie Strug was one of my girls that I first had, pretty much helping them get through the mental, physical abuse and learn to work out and eat on their own now in a new way with these new bodies as you grow up a little bit. And so I then met my husband, and it kind of threw me off course. And we met at the gymnastics camp that Chris and I were talking about. And I moved to New York with him, and I ended up performing there and wanted to go on Broadway. I actually wanted to go on Broadway to dance. I continued when I got older to dance and take ballet from 11 on. I grew up and did ballet. I needed it in order to have some grace for gymnastics. Thank God. And I was like, I was going to go on Broadway for my mom, and actually got on Broadway, but then skipped out to go to this audition called De La Gorda, and got into this harness flying show that's the most amazing harness flying show in the world, where I learned to perform. I learned to perform harness flying, dancing, stomping. I was the lead drummer, and it was a group of people from all over the world, and we learned to use our bodies to express emotion. And I learned to tell story and emotion, and I learned to use physical movement as a healing modality. And I performed the greatest show in the world that I loved. I would have done it for free for the rest of my life. And I got to tour with that into Asia and Vegas, and then I had my first child, and I thought my life was over. And I was like, oh, I'm giving up everything, okay, it's fine. And then it's like it was like 3 weeks after the baby, they called me to go back to New York to be on the show. And I was like, whoa, hold on. And so at 10 weeks, I was performing again, and the little baby was in the dressing room and breastfeeding in between shows. And it was a crazy, amazing life. Continued to travel with that. And then this director of Cirque du Soleil came, called Franco Dragon. And he was looking for a dancer, a harness specialist, a scuba diver, and a gymnast to create his show called Le Rêve. I just happened to be all of those things, and he could, that was the weirdest mix of things. And like, I just learned scuba while I was in Korea, just randomly, which is the worst place to scuba dive, let me tell you. There's nothing, cold water, you can't see anything. But I did it for a friend that was learning to teach scuba, so I had to like be his guinea pig. And I was a swimmer, and I was a dancer, and I was a harness specialist. And so I left to Vegas to do research development and then the creation of Le Rêve at the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas. And that's where I learned that I could create. I had always been told what to do. Like, they were like, and 5, 6, 7, 8, you do this, this, this. I was like, okay, I'll just do this, this, this. And then now it was like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. What do you want me to do? He's like, you make it up. And it was just like, wow. I got to create the harnesses. I got to make up aerial acts and choreography on the floor and use my emotion. And there's a dance called Splash, where it's me going through my shit, pissed off, crying in the water when the stage broke, and the director is screaming at me to do something, and they're like, fuck you, I don't know what to do, and he's like, brilliant, go do that, we're gonna make up a choreography, Splash. You're like, oh. So some things came out of torture, and other things were really out of my passion and my love and of the aerial arts and the harness and flying and performing. And so I'm very proud of that, and got to perform and choreograph and teach and assistant to the choreographer. And then I got pregnant again, and that's when my husband and I were like, Vegas is going to kill us if we don't leave. And it was sucking the life out of me, and it was not a place to raise my children. So we went back to where we had met at gymnastics camp, just a little bit south in Ventura. And that's where we live now. And I was going to be a housewife. I was done. I was tired. I was doing shows all the time. But I used the hammock to get back in shape. And then all the neighbors were like, what the hell is that? And then they were in my garage. And then my daughter wanted to learn silks. And so I taught her silks. And then all of her friends had to come in the garage. And our garage is like a circus school. And it was just like, oh my my God. And then it just was like, we got to get a place. So I went to a dance studio and did that. Then that blew up. Then we went to another place. And then we were just like, we did it. We just opened a studio. And it's my daughter's fault. She actually dreamt of it and wanted it and desired it and wrote a story about it in school that I read after we opened the studio. Oh, and cool. She had asked for color for walls and certain things. And like, it was the studio. And she manifested it, yeah. When she was in first grade, they told her, right, if you have $1 million, what would you do? And so she was like, if I had $1 million, I would make the AIReal studio, and I would have bright walls, and I would do this, this, and this. And then she, was like, but I wanted to save $10 for a new pair of leggings. I just don't want to be, selfish. I was like, oh my God. It's so cool, right? And so we did that so she could have a place to train, and we have all our Cirque friends that come in and train, and then I teach teachers to train, and it's just blossomed, and that's where we are at now. As the brand is growing, we are getting new teachers, we are spreading the love of AIReal Yoga, seeing incredible transformations in people. The healing modality of AIReal Yoga is crazy amazing, like huge. It's taking away pain, it's taking away fear, taking away doubt. It's really healing people in a tremendous way. And I love to see teachers get to teach, because then you get to see those transformations and be a part of that. And so we're continuing to, grow studios and grow teachers, and it's growing in that way too, where now I'm gonna have other teachers teach the teacher trainings and another manual and continuing education. And so I wanna also create a space for the teachers to have growth, learning, and then eventually some teachers are gonna wanna be the lead teachers teaching. So trying to create a path for the teachers in the studios so everyone can feel supported. Yeah? And that's my story. Yeah? Yeah? Yay!